Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're from Spyropoulos' studio. Our team name is SORT, and I'm Heidi Han.
I'm Saenawee.
I'm Ruilin. And for this year's brief in our studio, we examine the future of culture. So in our research to answer the studio brief of re-examining the cultural building of the future, we aim to challenge the architecture as we know it today. We question the architecture that is mostly a passive entity, one that is conceived of, materialized, then occupied, a linear and inflexible one. Therefore, in its static and familiar nature, it has limited agency, and it is constrained in the ways that occupants engage with the environment. The Pompidou's original brief was a radical one that tried to start a conversation between culture and the public. In the 1960s and 70s, it was a revolutionary idea to allow for public engagement and also to respond to the constantly changing times. Therefore, the original goals of the Pompidou was to be flexible, transformable, and adaptable. However, even with these goals, the realized building and the outcome of the built building is one that remained relatively static. The outcome of the competition did not address the building as an agent, nor did it challenge the agency of its contents and its occupants.
So as we look at arts and objects relation, arts are selected and displayed in the exhibition by curator. Arts are located in the predefined space and also location. When people view the objects, objects in space act as passive agents in the typical way.
So over the course of our studio exploration, we questioned what happens when a building can become an active participant. What if multiple agents could actively engage in the environment? What if the building could become an agent that makes decisions and responds to different agents, including people, cultural objects, and space? What if the agency of participants, such as occupants and the content, could influence the decision-making of a transformative building? And what if we examined a new agency, the agency of objects, as part of the conversation?
So instead of siloed relationship of each agent and objects at key places, we try to investigate on the model that all the agents in our building interact together in a non-hierarchical way, and all the agents are active participants.
So looking at the numbers of visitors, space, and the number of cultural objects in the Centre Pompidou today, we correlated the Centre Pompidou with one of a cultural warehouse. With the large number of visitors, the limited amount of given space, and the amount of cultural artifacts that the Pompidou houses, we wanted to propose a model where the cultural artifacts could be more easily accessible to engage within a cultural space.
So in order for all the objects in the Pompidou collection to be constantly on display, we estimate that in one unit can be occupied with 8 objects. We need to have at least 7 Pompidou. In order for every object to be active participant, we need a lot more flexible space than traditional museum. Thus, all the object will use city itself as a space for it to constantly changing and being on display.
Seeing that the traditional way of displaying art is not flexible enough in its current state, we correlated the future of culture to the logistical models and technologies such as Amazon warehouse and Heathrow luggage delivery models. We looked to these models, which allow for dynamic organization and sorting of objects, people, and spaces. We investigated how our research proposal could be best provided and provide a logistical infrastructure to organize, sort, and engage different cultural artifacts, engage and respond to visitors, and reconfigure space. By proposing a dynamic and logistical sorting system where a building becomes an intelligent infrastructure for decision-making of multiple agents, the decisions made by the agents of building, people, and content create a choreograph of transformations that respond to these decisions in a curatorial fashion. Therefore, we speculate on the future of culture through an investigation of a building as a machine that performs as a plug-and-play type model. We propose environments that allow for the participation of multi-influential agents, questioning if a building, its contents, and its occupants can all be active participants that have the ability to navigate through a dynamic infrastructure. This proposed model for culture is a system that is constantly active in its decision-making, where the three agents, building, contents, and occupants, are constantly interacting. The building machine model organizes our world, and it takes on decision-making as an active influencer for the agents of our environment. We envision our project as a cultural sorting machine, one that is the antithesis of the architecture that we know of today, where architecture plays a passive role in sorting, but in ours, a culture machine, it plays an active role in organization to deliver people, space, and content.
So instead of typical discrete relationship between archive and exhibition space, we try to investigate on the model that blur those boundaries and provide the chance for all the contents in the archive to be displayed. With all of these parts in our research, we deliver, curate, and choreograph people, objects, and space.
So to organize our dynamic building and to allow for the engagement of these three agents, we felt that the best way to address this was through the level of a single unit. The unit that transforms the physical state enables the system behaviors to allow for an interactive, transformative, and intelligent decision machine.
Cube as a basic geometry allows for taking away space and produce easily with a simple mechanic in order to achieve our goal of delivering space, people, and content. We started our research by developing our basic geometry by subdivide the cube to test different transformation. In the development of our building as a sorting machine system, we started by basic rule set that were derived from our initial prototype and its relationship between its neighbors. Initially, we started 3 different types of cubes. The first, rotation and collapse. The second, collapse without expanding the boundary. The third, that can do both. In all of this iteration, we were interested in both the geometric transformations as well as the potential for neighbor behaviors with the larger population. And then we attach this actuating surface with the frame to test the idea. And then we went through the process of frame structure study, actuating pattern study, thickness controlling study, and material testing. After the combination of the surface and frame, we calibrate twisting angle with adjusting pattern shape. As it's the actuating surface, divide the space of 2 units. We try to adjust the opening of the surface to control the space continuity. At last, we found out this pattern with parallelogram air beam to be the most efficient pattern, which only need to inflate the airbag at boundary with the medium layer of airbag controlling opening. In this case, we're able to achieve the same twisting effect of the pattern on the right side with a thin, fast inflated, and flexible surface at the left side.
In addition to the single unit, we examined behaviors when multiple units would interact with each other. In the unit's geometrical transformation, the transformational action of rotating and collapsing forces the unit to go outside of its boundary when transforming. Therefore, in a neighborhood such as 3x3x3 units, there were distinct relationships between the units and their neighbors to allow for transformation, where the different degrees of neighboring units must translate to allow for the transformation. Further developing our unit, we saw that different subdivisions would provide for different types of relationships with its neighbors, and based on its method of transformation. We looked at the neighborhood behaviors and explored parent and child relationships, the states, and its impact on the overall transforming cluster of units. For our building as a machine to be active, we developed a prototype that is suggestive of a way of architecture as an active participant, and by 3 main branches of mobility, transformation, and its behaviors. Additionally, to develop our unit prototype, we wanted it to be an active agent and a space maker, so we developed a computational model simultaneously with it, and to do so, we created different types or states of the unit of the cube that correlated with the potential to define surfaces, space, and paths within our system. Here we looked at the unit and how the prototype could aggregate to provide directionality in the X and Y directions. And here we looked at the ways the unit prototype could aggregate to provide directionality in corner conditions. Using these local rule concepts, our initial investigations looked at the possibilities of having intersecting paths and transforming paths, creating opportunities for other paths and spaces to open and close up within our dynamic machine system. We examined the relationship between a choreographed path and spatial experience alongside with more spontaneous or emerging spaces created by the transformations and user interaction. From the research of the behaviors between the units and its neighbors within a cluster of units, we identified the levels of densities within the system that allow for transformation within the neighborhood condition of constraints. Assuming that all the units could transform within our system, we saw that different densities and patterns of neighborhoods could be generated. Similarly, when we started to look at a space-making system, we saw that different densities had the potential to create an inflexible or flexible system, and we tried to aim for a more flexible system. And therefore, from these studies, we utilized density and porosity targets to build a computational model that would allow for the system to transform, reconfigure, and reorganize.
In order to achieve the horizontal mobility, we developed this frictionless surface between the bottom and the ground surface. We achieve by testing lifting, direction controlling, base surface testing, and direction self-correction. After the unit twisted up by actuating surface, frictionless surface is inflated, which create an air chamber beneath the lifting propeller and lifted the whole unit. The lifting, meanwhile, the thickness created by this frictionless surface offered enough height for the direction propeller to spin. As our unit was attached with its neighbors by magnets in the prototype, when the frictionless surface is inflated, it pushes up the surface to be detached with its neighbors to achieve the freedom demanded by mobility. When it's inflated, it's the frame attached with that support the whole weight, so it will be more energy efficient.
So from the development of the unit prototype, initially we had assumed that our prototype could achieve both range of mobility, but after doing a physical prototyping workshop, we noticed that having a primary horizontal mobility strategy would have implications into our system of moving units. The arrangement and the setup would change. The left side showing our previous possible arrangements and porosities, whereas on the right side it's showing the more current methods of moving together and clustering together while rearranging the space.
These are the implications of a primary horizontal movement setup. And in order for a unit to transform, in computation, it has to check their adjacent primary neighbors, and then it needs to check for a vacancy space within the most local 5 by 5 range of vision, if those vacant space is available. And it's less than the number of units that have to move away, is have a chance to transform. And this is showing the mobility and transformation in our prototype test. The neighbors. Okay. After we developed the unit that have transformable capacity, in order to deliver the aggregation to cluster of space, we developed certain logic for creating aggregation by connected urban fabric with iconic place and event of that certain times. So we try to connect the urban fabric with the event and iconic place at the moment in time by we start by the nodes and intersection around certain sites, and then the iconic places and certain event location around those sites to create maximum visual interaction with all these information. And the influence of those connection is based on its location, and it based on its location in the site and its order of the connectivities, the site geometry, the site topography, and structural capacity. So at first, as we try to connect the start nodes and the end nodes together, we first try with the random setup on the left side, but with that one, it's never give us a constant result that everything in the aggregation can connect together. So later on, we try with the generative setup with the customized Conway Game of Life generative system, but that result with our brute force, everything not able to be connected and weave together. So we decide to use genetic algorithm to improve and find the generative rules and initial setups. Thus, computational acts as a co-author of our projects. As shown in this simulation, the GA start to become smarter over time until every node connected together. Because our building keeps changing over time, the genetic algorithm can find the right number of the rules of aggregation at a certain time with far less amount of time than us. And this is the result of our trial on genetic algorithm that showed that every node's connected, and after it find the result, it will try to maximize the porosity of the aggregation to be more efficient with the number of units within the site. As you can see here, as the learning process starts to increase, as the generation increases, the porosity will try to get down. And then we try with the different scenarios and condition of site to see how the computational logic adjusts with the Pompidou flat site, Pompidou site with slope, Pompidou site with the big object inside it, how they interact with it and how they negotiate with the ground, and also the site with the river in the middle and also the building inside.
And now we will explain how our system delivers people and objects through horizontal sorting within our machine.
Apart from sorting through the unit's transformation and mobility, we developed the surface inside the unit as another layer of sorting method. In this soft inflatable surface, we explored different reaction and behaviors. These were our first tests on how our agents, people, and content could interact with our unit neighbor at the local scale. This is the basic 3x3 gridded model that we tested, and how they interact between two neighbors.
So taking the behaviors of our prototype for the functional surface, we simulated different behaviors on how objects could move horizontally within our space, allowing for the mobility and agency of the content to sort throughout the building. We proposed that in different areas of the space, different behaviors could influence how objects are displayed, moved, and observed, and objects could be choreographed to move in a specific pattern. Different patterns of inflation and deflation could control the impact of the distribution and objects horizontally. And objects could also be clustered and then dispersed. The objects moving dynamically and constantly on the horizontal would provide for a choreograph and spectacle of the display of objects within our system. In the function surface, we also tested filling different materials in the surface to test a space jamming concept and explore the ability for our soft surface to grip and hold. And here we explored how the objects could transform in their display spheres to allow for their mobility as well as for their interaction with the visitors in space.
And as part to indicate it where the interaction of horizontal sorting will occur, we developed the space defining rules to define a one-story space within our 6-meter cubes. So we look at 3x3 range of neighbors. If that unit has a certain amount of surrounding unit, it have a chance to become a space, and we will check for another rules. And then if the unit connected to path, it have a chance to become the entry to that space. And if that unit connect to the space, it will become a chance to become an actuated sorting area. And because of our unit have 4 sides and have the face-to-face combination, it will have only 1 story in the combination. So in order for our project to have multi-story space, we will have to create the in-between space inside the aggregation. So the algorithm to find that is look for the void that has unit below it, and it's checking the same thing, and that void can become the space. And then as we run the simulation in code, the development of project, when it's being occupied and the path and space relationship start to grow, that's showing the occupancy and majority of the building. The cyan color showing the space and dark cyan showing the in-between space. And this is a rendering showing 1-story space, our most intimacy space. And this showing the multi-story space. And it's showing the bigger multi-story space with big object and alternative relationship to the grounds of the aggregation.
Now we will explain how our system delivers people and objects through vertical sorting. In addition to the horizontal sorting of people and content and space, we also have vertical sorting. Using the rotation transformation of the unit, people and objects are able to traverse between multi-story spaces, and global spaces are transformed by the local behaviors of moving neighbors and transforming units. This vertical sorting allows for the intersection of people and objects and a dynamic infrastructure for our sorting machine.
And it has 3 types of path for vertical sorting. The red one would be the shortest one to the certain place, and the yellow one would be the one that less transformation path. It will try to get on the desired destination with the least amount of transformable unit within this path. And the blue path is the path that leads to the target, while it takes us to the area where most of the object is. And then we run the simulation again. So in this one, as you can see that the path start to grow, the space also growing, and then the number of transformation unit will increasing in this scenario and also in these scenarios. And then we combine the coding simulation with actual scenario. The code simulation shows the vertical sorting and number of transform unit inside those routes, and also the animation showing the choreograph.
And this is a walkthrough, just a little bit of an experience of what it would be like to traverse through and go through this sorting machine. And you can see where people intersect with each other, as well as objects that are moving and being sorted vertically and horizontally. So by re-examining the relationship between people, objects, and space through our building as machine proposal, we ask what is a meaningful way to engage with our environments to experience culture. We seek to challenge agents in our environments to be active participants in our cultural machine. Through the symbiosis between man and machine, our dynamic cultural warehouse of multiple agents proposes a model of architecture that becomes an intelligent decision-making machine and an infrastructure to sort and reorganize the complex nature of relationships between people, space, and objects.
Thank you.